So my guest today is Sonia Dynamo Price, a top career strategist, salary advisor, and leadership coach. Her mission in life is to support professionals to have greater meaning, better work-life balance, and significantly higher pay. She's the distinguished author, and she is distinguished, of 2 books and has helped many clients land dream jobs with organizations such as Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Meta, Starbucks, AT&T, Nordstrom's, and many other large and small organizations. Sonia Dynamo, welcome. Thanks for making time today.
Thank you for having me, Jeff. I'm so excited to be here and have this conversation with you today.
I'm glad you're here, and we're going to have a fun conversation, folks, about targeted job hunting versus what we're going to start off with, which is people tend to send their resumes out to job listings, and they send them out and they spray them over the Western Hemisphere, or if you're in Asia or Europe, your equivalent, and they pray that they'll get a response. Why doesn't that work so well, Sonia?
Perspective, because it's very frustrating from a job seeker's perspective, because oftentimes they can apply for hundreds and hundreds of jobs and they may or may not actually ever hear back from a potential employer about, whether they're going to be called for an interview. So, this whole spray and pray approach, it really does not work that well. And it can be extremely time consuming and exhausting for the job seeker. And it doesn't work because what we really need to see, what recruiters and hiring managers are looking for in your resume, is they need to see immediately. They're going to make a 7-second decision on your resume of whether they're going to call you for an interview or not. Before it even gets to that point in time, you have to beat out the ATS system, the applicant tracking system. So if you're only applying for jobs online, there's this ATS system that will scan for keywords and key phrases, job titles, experience, education. And if you don't meet the predefined criteria of what that computer system has in place for you, you will never have a human being set eyes on your resume or your career profile. So we need your resume, and this goes for your LinkedIn profile as well, is we need everything to be really clearly articulated and completely in alignment for the jobs that you're applying for.
And making the fit seem obvious to them. Because if you
Absolutely.
make them read, like Sonia said, 7 seconds, and I know when I did search, I had it down to 4. So just make the fit obvious, as though a 6-year-old is reading the resume. Don't make them work so hard, because they're not going to do it. It's really that simple.
One of the biggest areas where I see this is in job titles. In my experience, recruiters and hiring managers, if they're hiring for a director of operations, they want to see somebody who already has experience of being a director of operations. So if you're someone, you have a very clear idea of what you want to go after. And I think this is where we really first need to start off in the conversation is let's look at your career roadmap and let's get clarity on who are you? Where are you going? Where have you been? What's the gaps that might exist in that space? And how can you position yourself in such a way that you can actually land the types of roles that you're going after? But if you want a job as a product manager and your resume says project manager all over it, in your mind, that might seem like an easy match. But in the mind of a recruiter or hiring manager, they're like, I'm looking for a product manager and I want someone who has this exact experience. And they're going to be looking for those specific titles and the key words and the key phrasing, the skills and responsibilities and accomplishments that goes along with that.
And seeing the functionality of what you've done. So for example, folks, as you know, when you're submitting a resume, you've seen a job description and it talks about requirements, it talks about responsibilities. And the more you can line those up in your resume and earlier in the document rather than later, the more likely it is that you're going to be invited for the interview. As Sonia says, if you're a project manager and they're trying to hire for a product manager, I know you think you could do the job, but why don't you just make it easy for them?
Yeah. I found through this whole space, and this is one of the biggest challenges that I see that job seekers encounter, is that this whole process, it really is about marketing and sales. So are you marketing yourself correctly? And by that, I mean, are you saying the right message at the right time to the right audience? And you really do need to get into that marketer's mindset to be able to see that. If you're looking at it from your own perspective of like, oh, yes, I've got these great skills. Won't somebody just notice me? Well, you've got to give them a reason to notice you. And so what's the hook? If you're thinking about it from that marketer's perspective, when they look at your resume, what's that initial hook? What's the thing that catches their eye? And are they immediately seeing what they want to see about you in comparison to the other 400 candidates that are applying for that same job? Most of those people are going to get screened out from the ATS system, but when they cull it down to the top 20 of who they might actually call for an interview, are they immediately seeing what they need to see? And is there a good hook? Is there something on your resume that's going to immediately stand out that says, yes, I definitely need to speak with this person?
And the systems are doing a lot of that front end work for them, rating the resume based upon predetermined criteria and assigning a grade to it. And, how many people do you think they're going to call who have a 60 as the grade that the system attributes to? So understand you've got to rate yourself higher. And that comes down to giving them the terms that they want to see earlier in the document. And there's a lot more that we're not going to go into today, but make the fit obvious to the system and to the person who may follow up to just confirm what the system identifies, because these things are imperfect, so that you stand the shot of getting in the door. But that's back to the spray and pray. And we're going to be talking about targeted job search. And we've been talking about why not to do spray and pray, why not to just flip your resume like burgers at a fast food restaurant to every ad that you see. Now let's switch over to targeted job search and how someone engages in a targeted job search and makes it work for them. I defer to you, oh expert Dynamo.
Well, when I work with clients or when I'm looking at specific job seekers and helping them really get a meaningful and fulfilling job, where we oftentimes start is in predefining and clarifying a career roadmap. Many of us have worked inside a business where we're part of a team, a department, an overall organization that has a product roadmap or key goals and initiatives of what that team is up to and what they're working on. And these things get refined regularly throughout the year. There's quarterly updates, biannual updates, annual updates, right? We need to be doing the same thing for our careers. And what I found is most job seekers don't really put that strategic thought into their career, that maybe they have just accepted whatever job came along. They've had, they've been very lucky. They've had people offer them various different jobs, and they've just kind of like gone along and said, okay, sure, I'm good at that. Sure, I'll do that job. Or they accepted the first job that was offered to them. And that can be helpful when you're very first getting started out, because you need that initial experience to be able to draw from. But then after you've gotten a certain amount of experience under your belt, or you want to be very strategic right from the get-go, we need to be thinking about, well, who are you? What do you really want to be doing? What's the right job title? What's the right scope, the responsibility, the compensation, the company culture? What are all the things that are really important to you? Even now that we're coming out of the pandemic, most of the people I'm talking to say, I want 100% remote. Like now that companies are starting to call us back in, I don't want to go back to the office anymore. I want to be remote. So, when you take that time to very clearly articulate your career roadmap of identifying who are you, what's important to you, what do you really want in your next opportunity, and then also very clearly defining your short and longer term career objectives. What do you want to be doing between, like, what's the goal in the next year? Maybe even 6 months, 3 months, what's your goal of what your most immediate goal? Where do you want to be landing right now? Then what do you want to be looking towards in 2 to 5 years? And then what does 5 to 10 years look like? Or, your timeline might look a little bit different for you, depending upon where you're at in your career, how much more time you have before retirement. If you're early on in your career, whatnot, you can, align that timeline and customize it specifically to you. But you should always be looking forward to the future and always be looking to see what's the skill set and the requirements needed in order to be eligible for whatever that that job title, role, responsibility requires in order for you to get hired in at that level, then that gives you a career development plan to be working on over time as well. And then you just want to slowly be working towards each and every single one of those steps and making sure that your resume is in alignment with that. And I actually recommend that when you're putting your resume together, that you be looking at not just what do you want to be doing next, but what's the next step after that, and actually start to incorporate some of those elements into your resume and your LinkedIn profile, because then this is going to be much easier for you to land a bit of a stretch role for you. And if you just always accept the same role at the same level of what you've always had, there's never going to be any career progression or advancement. But we always want to be thinking about how can you take on, either a little stretch role or a fairly big, significant stretch role, because that's the power. That's where you're going to be able to make those significant leaps in your overall career and in your compensation and in your leadership capabilities as well.
Did I hear correctly that you're saying as soon as you start in the next organization, you identify the step after that, you should start tailoring your LinkedIn profile to demonstrate your ability to stretch into that next role? Did I catch that right?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I actually recommend doing it a little bit earlier on than that. Actually start evaluating what that next step is while you're updating your resume and your LinkedIn profile for this next step, because there's probably likely skill sets and responsibilities at the next higher level up that you'll be able to incorporate in your resume and LinkedIn profile now. And I have worked with clients where we've been able to help them make pretty significant jumps in title, scope, leadership capabilities, simply because we have such a forward-thinking lens. But it really does take that strategic thought and input to be able to look to say, okay, where am I now? Where do I want to be going? And what should I start incorporating? What should I start selling about myself? And I've actually worked with clients where they were initially interviewing for one level, but because they did such a killer job in promoting and positioning themselves, midstream in that interview process, they were actually up-leveled and considered for an even better opportunity along the way. So you can do it at different points. I usually recommend, like, if you're going to go through the process and really have that super forward thinking, start to incorporate what you can now, and then also get really clear on where are the skills gaps and what should you be working on in your overall career development so that you can continue to upgrade and advance over time. And if you can't do that now, do it when you get the job, because then, yes, you're always going to be looking forward and always trying to advance to that next step.
And how do you think they should learn what the skills deficiencies are, what the skills gaps are, so that they can start learning what they need to and start positioning themselves to the next level?
Mm-hmm. Well, so there's several different ways to gather this. One can be looking through the job description. So the job descriptions are not always going to outline, 100% of the skills needed to be successful at whatever level that you're trying to go for. But the job description will give you a lot of clarity into what are the keywords and key phrasing and roles and responsibilities that you need to have to incorporate in your resume for that ATS optimization, the applicant tracking system optimization. So the job description is the best and easiest place to start. However, I also recommend that you start networking and interviewing with people who are already in these levels and these roles of where you want to go, because then you can start to ask them, hey, could you take a quick look at my resume? Could I get some feedback from you on my resume? But also, can you tell me a little bit more about what types of projects do you work on? What's the skill set that you see to be, really relevant at the level of where you're at? And here's the really interesting thing, is that the higher up that you go, the more leadership focused that you are, the more soft skills that you need. But we don't often look for those on a resume. You don't often say, you can say things like stakeholder engagement or, communication skills, but those are typically things that are going to be evaluated for more so through the interview process and understanding what actual accomplishments that you have achieved through your career. So your results also really matter of, what have you been able to achieve through the the projects that you've worked on in the past. But I think what you might find is if you started to interview a number of different leaders, the things that they're going to tell you, like, yes, there might, depending upon the type of position, there might be some very specific technical skill set needed to excel at whatever particular field that is. And I think the higher up that you go, the more successful that you are is generally through social capital, and how well adept that you are through facilitating problem solving with other leaders, other teams, and like leading your direct team, but also having that cross-functional power and responsibility, and being able to guide others, in a way that everybody can move forward and actually cause the results that you're looking for.
You use the term social capital. I want to make sure the audience understands the term. Could you define it for them?
Yeah, social capital. So this is really like the power of how do you get things done in working with people. And so, this could be networking, but this is really about relationship building, so that when you have a favor to ask or you need something from someone, when you go to them and you ask for their support, you ask for their help, that they're there. They're there to help you and support you along the way. So this is something that you build and grow over a period of time. And it usually comes through, you giving just as much as you're asking for. So it can work a little bit like a bank account, if you want to think about it in that regard, is that you want to be thinking about, inside of an organization. And I mean, this could go for any group that you participate in, but we'll keep it focused on, work and business for now, is you want to be thinking about, who are the key decision makers and who are the key influencers, and how can you help build social capital with them, so that when the time comes, if you go to them and you ask them for their support, that you already have their ear, that they're there to listen to you, they're there to support you, and they respect you, they know who you are, they know what you're capable of, and you've probably already, given a fair amount to them, so that when you call in the favor or the special request, that they're like, absolutely, Jeff has helped me out so much before, why wouldn't I help him with this thing now?
It's interesting. You use the term capital, of course. It is an investment, and it's an investment in relationship. And it's different than reputational capital. Reputational can be, I wrote a book. I've seen this person's video before. I really like them, but there's no relationship there. And social capital is extremely powerful, folks. It's what encourages people to reach out and to be of help to you, as opposed to having to break down the wall in some way, shape, or form and working on getting through.
Yeah. The more that you have that in place, probably the easier your projects become. That's been my experience anyways.
The easier almost everything is.
Yeah.
In talking about targeted job search, we really haven't talked yet about targeting organizations. And so often when people think of targeted job search, that is what they think of.
Yes, so, absolutely. We're covering some great ground here today.
Yes, we are.
And there's more details to dive into here. So, I want to reflect back to that career roadmap that I spoke about in the beginning, because part of that is also identifying, okay, what's the industry that you want to work within? And then what are your targeted companies that you want to go after? So you can actually have a very targeted job search where, I recommend coming up with like 20 companies that you want to target. It could be less than that, but we want to make sure that there's a broad enough range that there's going to be feasible opportunities, right? So then you can start by going to those specific companies' websites and seeing what they have available. What are they currently hiring for? That way you can see what the published job descriptions are. Even if they don't have published job descriptions, it doesn't mean that you should not pursue an opportunity with that organization. You can actually still reach out to targeted individuals inside of each of those organizations. And in this way, you kind of become your own headhunter. So you can find these folks on LinkedIn through a targeted search process. You can start reaching out to them. connect with them either directly through LinkedIn, or there are ways that you can find their corporate email address and reach out to them through their email address. And you can get really creative in your job search if you want to. So before going into that, I just want to say, stepping back is like, take a look at those top 20 companies or how many ever companies that you come up with, and, go look at their websites, go see what they have available, apply for the jobs that are open and available, but make sure that your resume is incredibly targeted for those open opportunities. And of course, hopefully it's something that's totally in alignment with exactly what you want, the title, the scope, the responsibility, the compensation range. So you may want to do a little bit of salary research in advance to see if that company really pays what you're looking for. And then, if they don't have the open opportunities, then you could embark on, reaching out and kind of becoming your own headhunter. And like I said before, you could reach out to them through LinkedIn. You could even come up with some very creative strategies, like sending a video describing who you are and what you could do specifically for that company. And or like have a customized cover letter. I actually refer to it as more of a networking letter, because cover letter is something that you attach to your job application when you apply online. Most of the time, cover letters don't get read much anymore, especially if you're just attaching it in an online application. But if you use it as more of kind of like a networking letter, and you're reaching out and you're trying to establish a relationship with these individuals, then some interesting things can happen. But if you're going to approach your job search in this very targeted fashion, I do recommend that you have a broad enough scope of the different companies of what you're going after, and don't just rely on that alone. I would definitely still hit the job boards and see what's open and what's available, because it is easier. Like if there is already an established headcount, if they already have budget approved for a specific open role, it's generally easier to get hired for an open opportunity. But there are plenty of people who try to approach this in a very creative fashion and get their foot in the door through the other strategies that I just mentioned as well.
There's a fun story about Steven Spielberg and how he broke into film. And it basically involved him as a teenager wearing his father's suit. And he went on a tour bus of one of the studios and hopped off, walked into one of the cutting rooms and started working on his film in there. He did this for a few days before he was discovered, explained what he was doing, and they gave him a pass. And the idea was, there's a front door to get in, and no one would let him in the front door. He's a high school kid. There's a back door where you get referred, but there's also the side door too. And he took the side door to break in. And if you ever want to go on YouTube and watch the movie Amblin, which is the name of his production firm, but it's also the name of his first movie, there's always creative ways to do things. And sometimes it's through introduction. Introduction is always a great way to do it. But sometimes you got to use the side door, do something a little bit creative.
Right. Yeah.
To get your
and I think that's a great point, because if you do use the side door, you probably need to be creative. So you want to be thinking outside of the box of, again, think like a marketer. What's the hook? What's the catch? What will get them to take interest in you? So, Steven Spielberg, pretty bold. That's a pretty bold move. So if you're doing things in a similar fashion, and maybe it's just online, what's going to be the thing that's going to make someone pause? If you're reaching out to them, you're doing a cold outreach. What's going to be the thing that's going to make them pause and say, maybe I should invest a little bit of time into this. Who is this person? What exactly are they suggesting for me here? How can I, what's going to make them stop their busy day and take interest in what it is that you are contacting them about?
One marketer I know has the habit of sending 10 ideas to people. He creates 10 ideas every day as a habit, and then sends ideas to particular people. Said, look, I'm not looking for anything from you, but I just thought these might be interesting. You do something with it, great, that's okay. I'm not looking for anything. And it starts to open doors for him as people take him seriously. I'm not, this idea is good. A lot of these are garbage. But what can you do to stand out from the pack that are applying, trying to get in front of someone? What's the hook, as you say?
Yeah. Yeah. What can you do to stand out? And what can you do to showcase that you're a problem solver as well? So, what is the hook? Well, they're looking for someone to help them solve their problems. What are their problems? They need better results. They need to increase sales. They need to reduce costs. They need to increase their efficiency. They need better technology. They need, whatever it is that you're an expert in. How can you frame that up in such a way that it showcases that you're a problem solver, that you're someone that delivers results, and that, when you speak up or when you contact them, that you're someone that they should listen to and invest some time with?
Yeah. Most of my interviews focus on direct contact, but I'm running into situations where the executive search firms, of course, are the buffer between the institution and the individual. And are you saying that with the search firms, you're also doing this since they're going to buffer the corporate client?
Well, I mean, I think it depends upon where you get the contact information to begin with, because if you're reaching out on LinkedIn, then you can likely find the key decision maker or the key influencer who can then introduce you to the key decision maker. If you're reaching out and engaging with an executive search firm, you probably found that contact info off of the job listing itself, I'm guessing. Or are you saying that you share your clients' contacts, you share your clients' information across a broad range of different like executive recruiters?
I think I'm thinking of a couple of people I've been working with over the last year, and often what's happening is they're promoting themselves. So they're putting themselves in the position of being seen as a subject matter expert. Mm-hmm. They're on different, top fill in the blanks over the 2022, which is when we're recording this, or they're associated with a university and they're speaking there. So they're developing credentials that show up on Google. So when firms are doing searches and trying to identify people, that's one approach that they take. They cut the line, in effect, by being the one who's approached as opposed to always approaching. And the search firms, I know, do much the same thing. They look for the individuals who are perceived as the experts. And thus, it's just another technique, folks, for how you get in front of key people. So that you get in whichever door you want to call this.
Sure. Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the same strategies still apply no matter who you talk to as your first, the entry point for that particular position. You still want to wow their socks off, even if it's an executive search firm or an agency recruiter, you definitely want to be doing things to stand out, because then, they're going to carry that message on to the decision maker, so that when you show up for the interview, and in some cases, that's even an even better way, because, I think sometimes people think of recruiters or headhunters as kind of like the middleman, this necessary person that's in the middle. And I think sometimes recruiters and headhunters don't get the respect or the appreciation that they deserve, because those folks, they can become your best friend and they can help you navigate the entire process. So the more that you can sell yourselves to them up front, they're going to turn around and sell you to the hiring manager and to anybody else that you're interviewing with. Having that third party validation and credibility that's already been pre-vetted can speak volumes, because then when you're coming into the interview, you're not necessarily coming in cold. They're like, oh, hey, so-and-so already told me about you. They said, they said this about you. They said that about you. They said you sent them this really interesting video, or you had an article or brochure that you shared with them. That's really cool. So you can have some of those things, even if that person never even saw that video or the article or whatnot. Like the fact that there's someone there pre-selling you can oftentimes work in your favor. But that also means that you need to see like every single person that you engage with as part of this entire job seeking process. You want to be thinking of them as your partner. And this probably goes back to our conversation about social capital as well, which is, I've engaged with plenty of recruiters who have done wonders, for me and my clients, and helped them, land an amazing position. But they've also, pre-sold the client. They've given the client the candidate like heads up on, hey, you're going to be meeting with these people. Here's the things you should be thinking about before you go into the interview process. The more that you become friends with the recruiter up front, the more that they're going to be willing to share that information with you in advance. And the more that you treat them like a middleman, the less likely that they are probably going to want to jump in and say, hey, heads up, you might want to know this about the hiring manager, or you might want to know, like, this is specifically what they're looking for. So you really do want to, think of everybody as a partner and, build that social capital when and where you can. And the thing too to think about is every time you engage with a job search process, it might be just for this role, but it might circle back around in the future again as well. So if you treat people with respect and you show them who you are and what you're capable of, you can build lifelong partnerships with specific recruiters where the next time that they're recruiting for a similar type of role, they're going to think of you, they will remember you, and they will reach out and say, hey, I know we talked a couple of years ago. I'm not sure if you're ready for another new opportunity, but you came to mind. I think you would be a great potential fit for this. And you're already like 2 steps ahead of the process because you've already engaged with them in the past. And recruiters do typically take really good notes on candidates. So remember that too, that, anything that you say or do as part of the process that might be in your file, and they might think, refer back to that in the future and say, and it could just be something simple like great candidate, really easy to work with. Maybe they might have a few negative oriented comments in there as well.
Oops, caught them in a lie, which I used to put in the notes all the time.
Yeah.
Because you spot these things as, again, as a veteran search professional, I knew the truth behind a lot of organizations. And when people would try and con me, it was just so easy for me to identify the problems.
Right.
And time is finite today. And I'm just curious if you have 1 or 2 more points that you want to make with the idea of targeting in your job search versus spray and pray.
Yeah, I cannot stress enough the importance of creating that career roadmap. If you're someone who is really serious about the future of your career, please take the time to sit down and strategically invest in building out your short and long-term career goals and figuring out where do you want to go and what are the requirements in order to get there. I think that when you have a plan in place, it becomes so much easier to develop that skill set over time. And you start to attract the right types of opportunities to you as well, where you can have the projects that help you get those results, that help you gain experience with those specific skill sets. And I think when you have a plan like this built out in advance, it just becomes so much easier and you live into it as opposed to sitting back and waiting for it to come to you.
Amen. This has been phenomenal. Sonia, how can people find out more about you, the work that you do, the books, the courses, everything?
Well, thank you. I actually just launched a masterclass. I'm really excited about it. It's a free 14-minute masterclass. It talks exactly about how you can increase your income by $20,000 to $100,000 or more per year by making one simple change in your career. I actually have helped people earn up to $100,000 more per year than they were previously making. So this is a free masterclass. It's 14 minutes. It's a very low time investment. I would love it if you could check it out. And that's at dynamoincome.com, DYNAMO income, INCOME.com. You can also check out my website, which is dynamocareers.com. I have lots of free resources there. Would love for you to come check that out. And I spend a ton of time on LinkedIn. So feel free to look me up under Sonia Price, SONJAPRICE. And let's connect on LinkedIn.
I'll have links in the show notes for her as well. Thank you. And folks, we'll be back soon with more. I'm Jeff Altman, the Big Game Hunter. Hope you enjoyed the interview. If you did, share it, leave a comment, click the like button, do something that lets people know it was worthwhile. Also, come over to my site because I've got a ton there at thebiggamehunter.us. Go to the blog, go exploring. There's thousands of searchable posts there to help you, plus information about my books and guides and courses. You can schedule time for a free discovery call or schedule time for coaching. I'd love to help you. Lastly, connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/IN/the Big Game Hunter. Have a terrific day. And most importantly, be great. Take care.